Hello and welcome to another episode of Thoughts Per Chapter, Birth of a Killer Edition. Last chapter, Larton did a stabby. He did an oopsie. He killed Traz the foreman and had to flee his place of work because the rest of the child workers were screaming at him for murder. I'm sure this won't escalate any further. The chapter opens with the sentence, Larton ran without any real sense of direction, and this is something that Darren's done before in Demon Thief, a Demonata book. He talks about children running in panic without any sense of direction, bumping into each other, getting eaten by demons, but that's not happening here. Still, I like the idea that, Larton here is portrayed as being a panicked child who is running for his life, but has no idea where to go because nowhere is safe. And of course, he is not thinking straight. I have to wonder what the men and women of this city thought when they saw Larton absolutely hauling ass through the streets, falling over, scraping his legs, just running like his tail is on fire before they know what's going on. It might happen fairly often, to be honest. Maybe not the murder part, but the whole child running as fast as they can. Maybe they just thought, oh, it's just some dumb kid playing around, or it's a street thief. We're given to believe that Larton's escape from the mob is due to luck, because the mob took so long in forming, because they were so thunderstruck, is the word used here, as to the death of Traz. Perhaps some sort of hand of destiny guided him. That's not a quote, by the way, that's me speaking mysteriously. I love how the unruly mob is portrayed as being incompetent, because they kind of assume there's already an unruly mob chasing him somewhere else. I completely forgot about this scene where Larton runs into a 4-year-old girl who offers to take him in and get her mother to fix him and feed him sugar. Have you ever had sugar? She asks him. No, Larton replies. It's lovely, she whispered. So she's probably a girl of a slightly higher class than Larton, and I have to wonder where Larton's story would have taken him if he had accepted her offer. Larton's encounter with the girl does calm him. He doesn't really notice that that's what calms him. He doesn't know what calms him, but I think we're supposed to read into it that having a human who actually cares about his well-being calms him down a bit. The world suddenly makes just that tiny bit more sense. Wait, never mind, read on a bit. Thank you, he said to the girl and headed back up the alley. For what? The girl asked. Calming me down. Tinfoil hat theory time. The girl is Mr. Tiny in disguise. No, I don't really believe that, though. Could be fun, though. When Larton continues on his merry way, he walks briskly with his head down. We're not flailing and running around like a lunatic this time. We're being in incognito mode. Perhaps he'll find a group of monks to blend with. For those of you who might be confused, that was an Assassin's Creed reference. Quote, nobody paid attention to the thin, dirty, bloodied, trembling boy. The city was full of lost, wounded strays, just like him. So, it's mentioned in... Oh, which book? Hunters of the Dusk? Hunters of the Dawn? Killers of the... Anyway, it's been a while. It's mentioned in that book, in the Cirque du Freak saga, that this is not the first time that Larton has had to run from a mob in this city. So this is just one of the many points in the prequels where Darren, the author, is taking something that Larton has said, or that has been said about Larton, and is placing it within his history as an actual tangible point of story. And that sounds like quite the task, honestly, and I think he does it with tremendous grace in a lot of ways. But here is a possible plot hole, because it says that by the time the mob was fully formed and storming through the streets, Larton was out of danger's immediate range. Their cries didn't reach him or alert any of the people he was passing. So, would he have ever actually known that he had been chased by a mob? Maybe it was just assumed. Maybe it was just safe to assume there was people chasing him. Here's another tragic element in Larton's backstory. Quote, it never crossed his mind to go home. He knew that was the first place the mob would look for him, but that wasn't the reason he avoided it. If he thought his parents might try to protect him, he might have returned. If he believed people would grant him a fair hearing, maybe he wouldn't have fled. If there was any justice in the world, perhaps he had thrown himself at the feet of his accusers and begged for mercy. So again, just really driving home the idea that the society is the problem here, to the point where he can't even go home to his own family. His life as he knows it is over. Quote, children were killed in factories all the time. Larton mentions to us, the reader, through the wonderful invention of free and direct style, that he wouldn't actually expect his parents to even try and save him from the mob, which I believe later on, maybe in Ocean of Blood or Palace of the Damned, one of them, he he goes back on that and realizes that he might have judged his parents too harshly. But we'll get to that point. This line, Larton had never heard the phrase burning your bridges, but he would have understood it. I have absolutely no evidence to support this, but part of me likes to believe that Darren the author might have put that phrase in, like, just being like, oh, Larton realized he was burning his bridges, and then maybe his editor was like, hey, that phrase didn't come into being until the 1900s or something. Something you will realize as we go throughout these books is I have a lot of pet theories about decisions that are made in terms of writing these books. I will always call them out as such, though I will never pass them off as trivia. We then transition to a later period of time, the evening, as dusk is falling. Larton's getting cold, he's getting tired, he's worried about what he's going to do for shelter. This is just a lovely setting of the scene. Obviously, it's a very literal, changing of the scene. It's a changing of the setting as night falls, but it's also very much like it's sliding into the past now. The fire of the previous chapter, the fire in Larton's blood, it's kind of becoming... we're more in the consequences of the action and the action itself. I don't know, just a nice way of doing it. I don't think it's meant to be a metaphor either, it's just the way it comes off to me. Although, pathetic fallacy, it's a thing. And now we get into this kind of area of Larton getting to the point where his entire life changes, and the threads of destiny dangling, although they're never actually described that way. But it reminds me of how in Cirque du Freak, there's a lot of time spent talking about, if I had just done this, I wouldn't have ended up here. If I had just done this, I wouldn't have ended up here. Very similar to Darren, the character's start here. Quote, if it hadn't started to rain heavily, Larton would have kept going. Maybe he'd have slipped along the way, twisted an ankle, and perished of the wet and cold in the open. Or maybe he'd have made good time and found shelter, stolen a few eggs in the morning and set off in search of a job. He might have scraped by, worked hard, earned some money. Perhaps he'd have lived a good life, married and had children, and died at the ripe old age of 40 or 45. Okay, I've read on a bit. We do talk about destiny. Larton's destiny didn't lie in a ditch or any of the nearby villages. As Larton looks around looking for shelter, there's a brief break in the rain, and his prayers are answered as he sees the tombstones and realizes he's near a graveyard. That very much sounds like divine intervention. It might not literally be divine intervention, but I think it's meant to evoke that feeling. I think long-time readers of the Cirque du Freak series reading this chapter for the first time may have had Des Tiny on their minds. Although I'm not sure that Des Tiny would have even known of Larton or had any particular plans for him at this point. He might have done some time-travelling shenanigans like he does towards the end of the Cirque du Freak books though. But I don't know if it's ever mentioned that he specifically is able to go back in time or if he just gets to send his little people. Part of this reread is analysis based on what's already known of the series, and part of it is me rediscovering parts of the series, so apologies if I'm misremembering anything. I love a little detail that he and Verhorsten have been to this graveyard once before looking for ghosts or headless horsemen, which is fun to kind of think about this idea that a place, and this is very much put on by me more so than the book, but the idea that this place is important but at a future point in time. So it's significant to you, but not at the time in which you first visit it. I love stuff like that. You could argue that it's interesting that Larton finds Sebenile in a tomb, which is meant to represent rich people, because Larton's about to become rich in power, like raw power in his body and like longevity in years, and the ability to go adventuring across the world like he dreamed of with Verhorsten when he was younger, which only the rich would be able to do. He is about to enter this tomb of a dead rich person, and it's about to give him opportunities for his, well, I was going to say his life, but I guess his unlife. Oh, sorry, he doesn't go into a tomb, he goes into a crypt, which is where the truly wealthy dead hang out. Can you tell I'm reading this as I go? I love his reasoning of, crypts, if they could keep the dead dry, they could keep the living dry too, at least for a night. And so, as Larton makes his way to the graveyard to seek shelter with his new life, the chapter comes to a close. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like. It helps the channel a lot. Leave a comment saying what you like about this chapter. I love that we're getting into like the dark and gothic side of things now. We spent the first 4 chapters talking a lot about this Victorian style society and its injustices and stuff like that, and now we're kind of like getting more into like the gothic side of the story, which is very exciting indeed. I love that stuff. I like the setup it took for us to get to this point where this I accidentally called him an orphan at last episode, I didn't mean to, but this orphan-looking, poor, bedraggled child is seeking refuge in the Garden of the Dead. There you go. There you go, there's some fucking imagery for you. If you like these videos, feel free to subscribe, because I'm currently doing them every day. Don't know if it'll stay that way, but I'm going to try. And I'll see you in the next one. I'll see you tomorrow. Me back here tomorrow. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of something. Fuck. I wasn't going to have any bloopers this time. Hello and welcome... What?